Thanks very much, Lascan Corla, and can I thank all sides of the House for their contribution to this debate and for their support of the principles behind this particular motion. And can I particularly thank Cotton Gowlev, who assisted us with the drafting of this particular motion and the research behind it. Minister, look, there's something fundamentally wrong in a country where we're in the middle of a housing crisis, which has got far worse in the last number of weeks, and yet we have 90,000 vacant homes scattered around this country. Now, the West and North West Regional Assembly has identified 44,905 residential and commercial premises that are empty in the 5 Connacht counties and the 3 border counties of Donegal, Cavan and Monaghan alone. This is 1/3 higher than Ireland's total national annual housing requirement of 33,000 homes. And Minister, there are whole streets in our towns and villages that have not had a football kicked in them for a generation. Some 40% of the vacant homes in the country are in these particular 8 counties. Many of them are vacant family homes close to schools and services and have 1,000 megabit per second high-speed broadband outside the front door. So the housing crisis is not just about a lack of houses. It's also about the failure to have empty homes occupied by families, especially those in our towns and villages. In fact, if these homes were occupied, it would have an immediate dividend to the state, to rural Ireland and to homeless families. And frustratingly, I have been making this particular point for years. Thankfully, Minister O'Brien has listened to the arguments I've put forward, and the Government have taken the suggestions on board. A whole section in the Housing for All strategy is focused on how we can bring families back into empty houses around our country. However, the strategy was published last September and we're still waiting for the implementation. And Minister, hear you this evening pointing out that the Town Centre for strategy is going to help to develop this. But there's no point me going to my clinic on Friday morning, talking to a family who have become homeless again and saying the Government have another plan in terms of Town Centre First. Plans are no good. We need to see action. I'll give you a practical example, Minister. County Roscommon. We have the perverse situation in County Roscommon that we have a vacancy rate of 14%. We have 4,090 vacant homes in County Roscommon today. There are just 12 for rent. And we have just 334 for sale in the county. And we have a housing crisis in County Roscommon. We have had families in emergency accommodation because there is no door that they can go in. And yet we have over 4,000 vacant homes in our county. Local auctioneers have waiting lists for people for rental accommodation or that want to buy housing in the county. And in East Galway the situation is even worse in terms of the demand being much higher, and our local villages there don't even have wastewater facilities. And Minister, you're talking about wetlands to deal with wastewater. We've wet streets because the sewage is flowing down, raw sewage is flowing down some of the streets in East Galway at the moment. And that is the situation that we're dealing with on the ground. Now, we need to bring vacant and derelict properties back into the housing stock, and this needs to happen immediately because it's an untapped supply of housing that is there to be retrofitted, there to be refurbished, and in many instances the owners need innovative supports to take on these particular projects. Now, we have proposed in this motion that first-time buyers grant would be made available of €30,000 to help with the refurbishment of some of these empty homes. Now, the Government today is paying on average €31,000 to provide a service site here in Dublin, servicing developer privately owned land to ensure that it's opened up for development. A worthy initiative. But if we're prepared to pay €31,000 to try and develop land in Dublin, why would we not pay something to open up derelict houses across rural Ireland? And Minister, you mentioned the local authority lease and repair scheme. That's worthless in our part of the country, because the test is that you have to have a social housing test. There has to be a demand for social housing in that particular area before the local authority can use that particular scheme. Now, the reality is we have a housing crisis. The length and breadth of this country. We have 44,000 houses in my neck of the woods, and they're not going in under the repair and lease scheme because there aren't people in the village of Ahaskra looking for housing at the moment, or in the village of Caltra, or in Ballintubber. And yet we have vacant houses there. We have people that are prepared to go in under that scheme. So we need to have more flexibility in relation to it. And yes, if someone on the social housing list does not want to go into those villages, I can guarantee you there are many families here in Dublin who would be quite willing to relocate to rural Ireland if they are guaranteed a fixed rental charge for the next 5 years in that community, releasing a house here in Dublin that can provide social housing for a family here in Dublin. So we need a little bit of innovative thinking rather than the current rules and regulations that are there. We also do need to look at clustered housing, particularly for older people. And there are many older people living in houses today that are totally inappropriate for them in terms of the bedrooms and bathrooms upstairs. They would like to be able to move into locations closer to the town centre where they have access to the facilities, and we need to provide high quality, specialist, age appropriate housing for older people close to existing communities, promoting vibrant retirement within those communities so that older people can enjoy healthier and longer active retirements. But one thing that is critical to that, Minister, is security of tenure. You're not going to get an older person to sell their family home and move into long-term rental accommodation unless they know that they can actually afford it and that the rent isn't going to be hiked up, as has happened in many of those facilities around this country over the last number of years. And there is a responsibility in government to provide that clarity for people. But it's not just in relation to older people. We need to do this right across our housing stock. And this isn't a problem that is unique or new to Ireland. In fact, as the Cancorla would know, in the 1990s we had the very same problem in terms of agricultural land in this country. All of our land was leased on 11-month land. Today, approximately half of all the leases of agricultural land are for durations of longer than 5 years, and some of them up to 15 years. In agriculture, the taxation system has been reformed to incentivise long-term leasing of land for the public good. Now, surely, Minister, if we can accommodate cattle, we must be able to, in a housing emergency, accommodate children under a similar scheme by actually providing security of tenure in terms of housing right across this country. And I'm not talking about giving an incentive to big landlords. They're doing very well with the incentives that are there at present. But I'm talking about the accidental landlords with 1 or 2 houses, whereby that they could lease out that house for a 5-year, a 10-year or a 15-year period to a family. There'd be a built-in incentive for the landlord because they're guaranteed income coming in over that period of time, and it provides security of tenure for families. Because the biggest single problem I have in my constituency with homelessness is people being made homeless because of an eviction notice being issued to them. Now, if there are 12 houses in County Roscommon, when there are 4,000 vacant homes in the county, surely there's something fundamentally wrong with our housing system. There's something fundamentally wrong with our housing system when I have people in emergency accommodation in my county because we don't have rental accommodation available at the moment. And if we could provide security of tenure, it might act as an incentive for some of these houses to be opened up again. It might act as an incentive for some of the accidental landlords not to sell that property and actually enter into a long-term lease and provide security to those particular families. we're also calling on the Government to implement a 0% long-term loan scheme for retrofitting homes and for domestic microgeneration, where that will be paid back to the savings that are made on their energy bills. So, Minister, Rebuilding Ireland has failed to meet the annual target it set and is now running 41,000 units below the overall goal set by it. Now, the Government needs to think creatively on innovative ways to provide homes, and it's now time to make use of our existing housing stock, our existing resources, and provide roofs for homeless families right across this country. Garamahagat.
Thank you.